이어서 본격적인 국제 포럼을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 지금부터는 통역실을 이용해 연설을 들어주시기 바랍니다. Thank you for the wonderful remarks. The main program of the forum will now begin. Please use the simultaneous interpretation receiver if you need a language assistance. 첫 번째 기조 연설자인 닉 패트포드를 소개해 드리겠습니다. 닉 패트포드는 노샘프턴 대학 부총장으로 산학계 및 세계 각지의 사회적 기업 연구 프로젝트에 참여하여 경력을 쌓아오신 분입니다. 오늘은 영국 사회적 기업과 사회적 경제 부문의 트렌드와 미래에 대해 발표를 준비하셨다고 합니다. 무대로 모시도록 하겠습니다.
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a very great honor to be invited to Korea, South Korea, to give this talk on the trend and future of the United Kingdom's social enterprise and social economy sector. The United Kingdom has invested in many aspects of the UK social economy over an extended period of time and through successive governments. And this has built a strong ecosystem for social entrepreneurship in the United Kingdom. And we have a lot of things which are positive. We have capacity building support and subsidy at startup stage, and also the ability to scale up social enterprises as they develop. We have intermediaries, and I'll tell you a bit more about those in a minute. Intermediaries who understand what they are doing. They understand what we want to achieve as a sector, and they include lawyers and accountants, investors and public services. And this group of individuals are very, very important for the sustainability of a social economy. We have a legal system, perhaps one of the best legal systems, if not the best in the world. A legal system which which protects social enterprises and investors, which is very important. We have a culture of doing social good and of concern to address social disadvantage. But there are some things we need to improve on, and I think where we can get help from countries like Korea, South Korea, who are investing heavily in this area. In the UK, we are still weak in some areas of venture philanthropy and early stage investment, either equity or debt. There is some access to markets, and I'll explain a bit more about that in my talk. Some access to markets, but there are substantial barriers and influence and inefficiencies in the public and private commissioning of procurement. And procurement, buying goods and services, is a key aspect where social enterprise can make a big difference. However, we do have something of everything in the UK, and it's a very interesting mix of activities, investors, philanthropists, early startups, and intermediaries, and universities. And universities have a good role to play in this. And it's that mix, I think, of measures which is powerful in the United Kingdom, and something which I'll develop in the next few minutes of my talk. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, so here are some of this is just a few logos of the mix of players and actors, if you like, in the social enterprise sector in the UK, and I'll be talking about some of them in the rest of the talk. The British Council, obviously, very important. They've made some fantastic reports, not just on social enterprise, the social economy in the UK, but from around the world, and we'll hear from Martin about that a bit later. We have a company called Unlimited, and I'm a board director of Unlimited. This was set up in 2001 with a £100 million sterling investment at the start of the new century, the new millennium. And to my knowledge, it's still the only company of its kind in the world which supports social startups in the way that it does. Very, very powerful part of the UK social economy. We have Big Society Capital, founded in 2012. It's the first wholesale social investment instrument in the world. Very, very important thing. I'll come on to that again in a minute. We have a company called Clearly So, for example. These are an intermediary who bring together the supply and demand side. They join up social entrepreneurs with finance. We have the Higher Education Funding Council for England, HEFCE, who work with universities and the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills on an agenda around developing social entrepreneurship skills in young people, undergraduates at universities. We have our university, which I'll talk about in a minute, because we have a very clear mission and distinctive capability and capacity around social enterprise. But other things are going on in the social enterprise landscape in the UK. We have these things called social impact bonds, and you'll hear about that in a minute from Eleanor Nettleship from Social Finance, talking about the bond in Peterborough, which is about half an hour north of Northampton, where I work. We have the Social Value Act, which was introduced in 2012, which gives permission for public sector organisations to tender for big procurement projects, a very important aspect of developing social economies. And in 2014, we introduced something called the Social Enterprise Tax Relief Scheme. So government lowering taxes on companies, for companies or individuals who work in social enterprises. So together, all of that bundle, that package of activities helps to develop the economy in ways which are positive. So for us in the UK, from our perspective, what is this social economy? Well, there it is. I will read it because it's an important distinction. It's the social economy is part of the economy that operates between the private business side and the public sector, which is government. Includes organisations such as co-ops. The cooperative movement in the United Kingdom has a very long history since at least the 18th century. So this is not something which is particularly new to us as a country. We have non-for-profit organisations, we have a strong charity sector, and of course we have social enterprises. And it's increasingly seen that this model, the social economy, provides perhaps a new way of looking at the world, and there's a lot of uncertainty in the world. There's a lot of uncertainty in the United Kingdom right now because of a recent referendum held last week about the future of countries and the future of capitalism and what that means in a global economy. And we think, people like myself and others, that perhaps there's something in social enterprise and social entrepreneurship that may provide some kind of alternative to some of the more traditional public service delivery models within capitalist framework. Trends in the UK social enterprise sector. Well, Social Enterprise UK produce a report every year, and here are just some numbers, some facts and figures. In Britain at the moment, we have something like 70,000 social enterprises that contribute in the order of £24 billion to the economy of Great Britain. 73% of those social enterprises earn more than half, more than three-quarters of their income from trade. Now, this is a very important point, because for social enterprises to be self-sustaining financially, they cannot continue to rely on grants from government. At some stage, you have to break away and earn your own money. And that means that some social enterprises will go bust. They won't be able to compete in a marketplace, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. It's a sign of a mature and evolving social economy. 31% of those social enterprises work in some of the most deprived communities in the UK. 40% are led by women, and 12% are led by a member of a black or ethnic minority community, which, again, is an important aspect in terms of inequalities and reducing that in our country. Finally, social impact investing, and I want to spend a minute or so talking about this. It's about getting money to where it's needed, and how governments, private individuals, high net worth individuals and corporations can help in social impact investing. As a definition, this is money that targets societal or environmental objectives with a financial return at the end of it, but also with ways to measure achievement of both of those things. So if we look at what's happened in the world of investment, before about the 1980s, basically you're worried about your return, right? You stick in money, you want money back. It's tobacco, it's oil, it's whatever it happens to be. Okay? Pretty simple world, really, before the 1980s. 1980 to 2008-ish, just before the credit crunch, people started to worry about risk. Obviously not enough. The events post-2008 tell us that risk wasn't really taken as seriously as people thought, but risk was added to the mixture. So we've gone from a one-dimensional world of return to a two-dimensional world where we worry about return and risk. And what's interesting now in the social impact investing scene is that we've begun three-dimensional. Okay? There's a notion of 3D investing. So the green arrow coming out towards you from the screen, the third dimension, is about impact. Okay? So those three things working together: invest money in a social enterprise. You want your return, because you're not going to do it for free as an investor. You have a risk involved, but also you want to see impact being generated in your money, and that's a fantastic thing, but it poses problems, because how do we measure social impact? And that is an interesting piece as well, which people are looking at, not just in our country, but around the world. But within this geometry, the cube that's there on the screen, you can see that if you wanted to be bold, you could reduce the amount of return that you get on your investment and increase the impact. So you can change the shape of the cube, and that's an interesting discussion that's taking place as well amongst social finance people. How much impact do you want to generate? How much return do you want to trade off? And how do you balance the risk? All very new ideas around social impact investing, but I think the UK is leading the way, actually, in thinking through models which are three-dimensional in the sense that you have here on the screen. The challenge, of course, is to make that trade-off between return, risk, and impact attractive to the largest number of investors possible. So the most money is challenged towards companies that have impact and do good. And one example of what that might look like, here's a matrix along the top. There you have investors, I think that's what they're the investors, and here we have users. In these boxes here, people don't care about social impact. They're not interested. They've got money, but they haven't been drawn into the world of impact investing yet. The box here outlined in the red dots, that's the place that's interesting in the moment in the UK. Those are people who are investors. They want to get some social intent, and they want to produce social outcomes. The size of that market, we think, presently is about £2 billion, 2 billion euros. It's a big market. It's a big market, but it could be bigger if we can sell social impact investing in a different way. And just to put that into some perspective, this is the UK social market, not social investment market, the global managed assets in the UK, money that's available for investing. That's nearly all of that big blue pie. Okay, that's 115 trillion euros. How much of that is going into social impacting investing right now? Not very much. So that's the scale of the opportunity. It's vast. If you can draw even a small fraction more of what's going in to traditional sources, traditional investment vehicles, into social impact investing, we could do a lot more good in the world. That's absolutely for sure. A key thing is to link social entrepreneurs with money. Okay, this is this idea of an intermediary and what intermediaries are. So there's a bridge. You can imagine part of the bridge you have some entrepreneurs. Okay, what do they need? They want your money, don't they? Because they want to do good with your money. They want to have social impact. The other side of the bridge, you've got investors, people who may want or may not, depending on how persuasive you are, to give money to the investors. So the investors are supplying. They're the supply side of the equation. The entrepreneurs who want the resources, they're demanding it. They're the demand side. Okay? So you have a supply and demand, and you have some people in the middle. And in the UK, one example is a company called Clearly So, and that is an example of an intermediary, right? A social intermediary who will go to the entrepreneur, who will go to the investor and make that bridge. Okay? They play a very, very important role in the social economy in the United Kingdom and other countries, obviously, as well. And to me, what's interesting is that universities can fill that spot. Universities can be intermediaries. In fact, our university in the UK does play that role. Part of our strategy is to bring together entrepreneurs. In fact, we produce entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, through our undergraduate portfolio. We're also an investor, because in the UK, universities have very large degrees of autonomy. They can spend their money pretty much how they want. So if we decide we want to invest in a social enterprise, we will do. In fact, the University of Northampton, we buy social enterprises in the community. If we think we like them, and they're doing good work, we'll buy them, and we'll place our students as entrepreneurs into those companies, into those businesses. So we act as an intermediary. And one example on the demand side, which is happening in Britain right now, which is a collaboration between Unlimited and the Higher Education Funding Council in England, HEFCE, is this idea of sea change. And what sea change stands for is social enterprise education. Sea change in numbers. And this is a project, a pilot study, that's working across the UK between 89 universities and 30 colleges of further education. We've got nearly over 1,600 students in the pilot project at the moment. And very importantly, this idea of developing notions of social enterprise and social entrepreneurship in the student body has led to a very important outcome, which is that more of our graduates get jobs. It's about employability. Okay, 73%, nearly 3/4 of the students who are involved in the sea change process in these UK universities said that it improved their employability chances. And there is an issue, not just in our country, but in Korea and across the world in terms of employability for graduates. More and more people going to university, more and more people leaving university, and then being unemployed. What's the point of that? Okay, it is a problem, it needs to be addressed, and we think in the UK, social enterprise and social entrepreneurship skills embedded in the curriculum can really enhance young people's employability skills. And I think that's another reason to get involved in this agenda. This particular project, Sea Change, it started off as a grant-funded project a few years ago, so money was given from the Higher Education Funding Council to universities. That's now stopped, because you can't keep funding projects forever. You have to say enough. And the project Sea Change is now running as a consultancy basis, which is being self-funded. Okay? Again, that is an important transition away from permanent grant funding to being entrepreneurial, finding money yourselves for these sorts of projects. So that's a good example of something in the UK on the demand side. An example from my own university, and the University of Northampton is the only university in England which has got the Ashoka U Changemaker badge. We're a Changemaker campus. Changemaker runs out of the United States. Some of the biggest Ivy League universities are part of it, Duke, Arizona State, Cornell, etc. We're in England. There's another one, a fantastic university in Glasgow, in Scotland, Glasgow Caledonian, which is also a Changemaker campus. So between us, Glasgow and Northampton, we are it in the United Kingdom in terms of Ashoka U representation. But what we're doing at our university is building a brand new campus. 350 million, that's about $500 million US, a brand new university campus. And we're building it in the middle of a town centre which is rather run down, if I can use that word advisedly. It's a brownfield site, and it's a piece of land that was given to us through a local enterprise partnership. It's land that is laid unused for maybe 40 or 50 years. It's industrial. And so this is a regeneration project. And we'll hear more about regeneration subsequently. So universities working with local partners, regenerating land around them by building. And this gives us a super opportunity to engage with building contractors and other agencies and to really start to get some leverage on social value in procurement. So if you wanted to tender to build this, if you want to tender as a supplier, as a building contractor, to make this, this lovely new building here, you have to go through a tendering process. And what we put into the tender process is a requirement for social impact by all of the tenders. And it's 5% of the total score. It's not a high amount, but it's enough to make a difference. And if you're tendering for any work on this £500 million relocation project, and you do not have any aspiration to get involved in social enterprise or social entrepreneurship, you cannot help us in any way, then we're not interested as a buyer in talking to you. So it's using the procurement regulations to drive social impact through a big infrastructure project, and this is a good example of exactly that. Okay, so just to try and pull some of this stuff together, and this is a slide from a friend of mine, Cliff Pryor, who's now the chief exec at Big Society Capital. What does it mean then to build a social enterprise economy? How do all these various strands come together? Well, you need some drivers as a starting point, you need some actors, you need some next steps, and you need obviously some results. Why would you even begin to do this as a driver? Well, I think inequality is a fantastic reason to be driving a social economy agenda. If you look at the world now, it is getting more unequal. That is not, in my opinion, a good thing. And I feel that social enterprise models, social entrepreneurship, can go a long way to reducing some, not all, but some of the inequality that the world presently faces. And that has to be a good thing. There's also an interesting issue back in the UK. We have voted to leave the EU, as you know, and I think that's an opportunity, actually, to address some of the financial issues is the wrong word, but the UK economy is geared towards a financial services sector. Maybe some of those companies may not wish to stay in the UK. We need to do something instead, and I think there's an opportunity to use the social economy to fill any gap that might be left by the withdrawal of some of the financial services sector if they do decide to leave. I think that is not a threat. I think that is actually a rebalancing opportunity for the UK economy. So to start off, we have drivers, you've got economic, you have social welfare, you have innovation, you need to win support. The circle goes like this. The who's involved? Well, there's a government. Korea has a fantastic story here of going more or less from zero to hero in a small number of years in terms of how you've used government agencies to drive the social economy forward. Citizens, foundations, universities. I would challenge the Korean government to see if they're working closely enough with their universities. You have world-class universities in Korea, South Korea. They could do a lot more, perhaps, if you engage with them. I'm sure they will. The what are the next steps? You have the leadership here, I'm sure. You have the policy. Do you have the sort of finance that I was talking about earlier? Do you have a social impact investing strategy from the centre that may help to divert funds? I don't know, but that's a question perhaps you can pick up later. And then the outcomes. You need to get results. You need to measure what you're doing and make sure that the money that's being spent building the social economy is actually doing what you want it to do. So future trends, just to wrap up. Certainly in the UK, the future trends are that social enterprises will outperform traditional SMEs, small, medium enterprises. I say will. In fact, just last week, the Department for Business, Innovation and Skills produced a report. It's called Social Enterprise Market Trends for 2014. And that report shows categorically that social enterprises are outperforming financially and in other metrics traditional SMEs in the United Kingdom. There's an opportunity to increase exporting and licensing from UK social enterprises out across the world. An increase in women and BME-led social enterprises is a future trend, a desirable trend in my mind. And forward-thinking universities and other agencies should start to use social impact in their procurement processes in a way that I described for our campus relocation project. Right? So all that's good, but there are some issues. And the key one is that social enterprises are often small. They're often on the small side of SME, and they often don't have capacity to deliver major projects. So they do need help. All right? So even if you do open the doors and allow them to compete for procurement on big infrastructure projects, they may not themselves have the capacity to be able to deliver. And that's an issue that needs addressing. How can large contracts, so procurement processes and corporate social responsibility objectives, be integrated to deliver social impact? So how are the big corporate players involved in this? Okay? Is your big friendly corporate giant with their CSR agenda actually walking the talk, or are they just using it as a cover to boost their profits and make themselves look cuddly and nice to the consumer? Okay? They need to be challenged for sure. Finally, my last point really is to do with this notion of results. Results being more important than process. And from my own experience in the UK, looking at the social economy develop over the last 10 or so years, and perhaps what's happening in this country here, you tend to get a polarized argument that people, and it's about a philosophical choice. I personally care much more about impact, the outcome, right, than the intent or the process. So don't get hung up on definitions of what is and what is not a social enterprise. Okay? That is a sterile argument. Right? If you can argue forever academic terms, this is social enterprise, this isn't. We do have some rules and regulations in the UK about it, but it's not the main point. The main point is to get impact through your investments and make the world, bluntly, a better place. If you get caught up in arguing about definitions, you'll soon run into the sand and everybody will get rather frustrated. So in other words, don't worry too much about rules and definitions. Worry about what works. Go map, soup nida. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Petford. 네, 기조연설 해주신 부총장님께 감사의 말씀 드립니다. 네, 아마도 여러 가지 궁금하신 내용을 묻고 싶은 분들이 계실 텐데요. 질의응답은 기조연설이 모두 종료된 후에 진행하도록 하겠으니 잠시 기다려 주시기 바랍니다. 다음으로 두 번째 기조연설자를 소개해 드리겠습니다. 발표해 주실 분은 마틴 프라이어 주한영국문화원장님입니다. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Thank you very much. I'd first like to extend my thanks to our hosts and our distinguished hosts, the Director from the Ministry of Labour, Mr. Moon Ki-seop, and to the President of COSEA, my very good friend, Mr. Oh Kwang-seong. Thank you for inviting me and my British compatriots to this very exciting event. We witnessed a very dynamic and fascinating opening this morning, which shows just how lively the sector is in Korea. I'm not sure we could quite match the exciting opening, but perhaps we can reciprocate at some point. I'm very pleased to be able to participate and to meet so many leaders in the sector. We hear so much about the need for innovation and creativity in industry as part of the drive for a successful creative economy in Korea. It's also very good to be amongst people who understand the drive for a very similar change in social enterprise, and it's something, as we've heard from Nick, that we share with Korea, and I look forward to discussions on that very topic later today. Now, we at the British Council, as you know, are most well known for our work in English, in education and in the arts, and we've been operating in these areas for over 80 years in some countries and just over 40 years here in Korea. And our core purpose hasn't changed a lot in those years. We still aim to build friendships between the UK and other countries and increase the mutual understanding between the UK and the countries in which we work. We're in over 110 countries, over 150 cities around the globe. And what has happened is that to these more traditional areas of our work, arts, education, and English, we added society, recognizing that sharing ideas and values in areas such as access to justice, the role of women and girls in society, and minority rights, just to name three, enables the UK to learn from experience in many different contexts. And to these values-based issues, we added a sector that is, of course, about value as well as about values, and that's social enterprise. And as we've heard from Nick, the UK can claim to lead in many areas of the social economy. And I personally have witnessed the growth of interest worldwide in hearing about that UK experience and in how we've become innovative in finding ways in which both the public and the private sector can invest in social enterprise. I've also seen through my work in developing countries how the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, have led so many countries to adopt social enterprise models to tackle some of the most important issues of our time, and we're all striving for ever more sustainable and inclusive economies to repair the damage, environmental and social, that has too often occurred through ignorance and an often short-term approach to business growth. And we at the British Council see social enterprise as a fertile ground for our cultural relations work. I mean, we are a cultural relations organisation, and we know that it's a sector that very much depends on relationships of trust between business, between government and civil society. And taking that as an agenda for a wider conversation globally, because this is our experience in the UK, has, as I hope this short presentation will show, been a very exciting venture for us in many countries, including here in Korea. And what we've found is that there is real value in our ability to convene not only diverse representatives of the sector, both UK and international, but we can also see that the currency of trust is building better and more cohesive societies as that currency of trust is exchanged between civil society, industry and government. And our commitment to society work aligns with that of the UK government. I think Nick's mentioned some of the history of the sector. I mean, our Prime Minister now, in the time that he's been Prime Minister, has focused very much on social investment and the social investment market and the encouragement of social innovations as a way of tackling social and economic challenges. And the British Council participates in our government's international steering group on the social economy, and we've been involved with initiatives such as the Social Investment Task Force, whose chair here, Sir Ronald Cohen, is quoted, I think, in a very interesting quote, making a plea to business leaders to use their hearts as well as their minds to make a difference to the lives of those whom the markets have too often left behind. So these are the principles on which our global social enterprise program is built. So the alignment with the UK government, a very systemic approach, bringing the global, regional and the local together to get maximum impact, and convening people who are thought leaders so that a global narrative on social value supports the social enterprise movement. Our programs are growing. Last year, we worked with partners in 27 countries, right across the world, East Asia, South Asia, Middle East, North Africa, Europe and North America. And a key component of our work is the training of social entrepreneurs. And since 2009, we've been running a Skills for Social Entrepreneurs program, and nearly 16,000 people took part in that last year. And partnership, a real theme, I think, today, is key to the success. And we've got over 150 partnerships, NGOs, development organizations, education partners, community organizations, and businesses. And we are given access to their leaders, to development workers and aspiring entrepreneurs. And this program doesn't just cover training, but also professional mentoring, and gives access to UK expertise, global peer networks, and funding opportunities that we hope will give participants the opportunity to build successful social enterprises. And we reckon that 100,000 people were engaged face-to-face through this and other programs, study tours, policy dialogues, forums, and competitions. And we're always looking for opportunities to grow our work, and we're finding that the demand and the need for skills training is particularly strong in Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. And these are the four strands of our work. The first is the sharing of the UK's experience and looking at the role of government and the importance of strong policies that can provide the framework for social economy to grow and prosper. The second is capacity building, using the kind of programs I've already mentioned, such as Skills for Social Entrepreneurs, with a blend of training, mentoring, and consultancy. And it also covers the important area that is the focus of today, access to investment. And we also believe that schools, further and higher education institutions have a vital role to play to foster that interest and understanding of social entrepreneurship. And our third strand, education systems, as I mentioned, is why we share ideas on the embedding of the subject in curricula and on promoting strategic research and collaboration opportunities at universities and colleges. And very importantly, on giving school-aged children a chance to look at what social entrepreneurship really means and instill in them an appreciation of its importance in modern societies which are trying to tackle the problems that young people often care about so passionately, such as environmental degradation, social exclusion, and minority rights. And the last of the strands is advocacy, to advocate social enterprise approaches in international development. And our work in countries eligible for overseas development assistance, ODA, continues to grow. It's a very big area for us, and we champion the sector, basing our advocacy on research that we and others have done that demonstrates how important the principles of social entrepreneurship are to the sustainability of development. And that research has led us to publish two major reports. The first that you see here, Social Enterprise in the UK, gives a very detailed overview of a thriving sector, and we've confirmed just how diverse that sector is, how it's structured, and what government, national government, regional government, and local has done to create the ecosystem that Nick has mentioned that nurtures new enterprises and supports existing ones. And it looks at financing, investment, and funding mechanisms in a lot of detail, and how to measure the social impact. The second report, Think Global, Trade Social, is co-authored with Social Enterprise UK and with the support of the World Bank Group, and argues that businesses with a social purpose can deliver more sustainable development. And it looks at the drivers of economic and social change, the rise of income inequality, and the response of the social enterprise sector, and holds the sector up as an inspiring model and mechanism to help us achieve shared objectives for more equitable and long-lasting development. Both publications, I'm very proud to say, have now been translated into Korean and are, I believe, available here at the forum. So please pick one up and give us feedback too as to whether these are useful documents for your work. Now, we have a very large network of offices around the world, and that gives us a unique position to bring the UK ideas, experience, and expertise to other countries, and also to expose the UK's social enterprises to the innovation that's going on beyond our own country shores. And we're very committed to scaling up the sector, and our teams are working with partners to deliver the activities that I've already mentioned, skills, social investment, network building, corporate social responsibility, and media promotion. And I'd like to give just a few examples of these partnerships and showing how global our reach is. Here's a project in Ghana, and here our partner is a government one, keen to drive the concept of social enterprise. This is called Trashy Bag. It's an initiative, as you can see, where a company is using recycled materials to make bags, and this has led to opportunities for employment for the homeless. We worked with the Ghanaian government to build up the skills for running such an enterprise. It's a small project, but it shows how business methodologies combined with social purpose can be part of the national development plan of a country that's been aid-dependent for many decades. Another example, this is called Moringa Connect. This is a project where local farmers have been able to increase their income, strong principles of organic production with efficient supply chain systems and market access programs. And our role was to support access to investment funding and incubation opportunities, and we worked with the founders of this particular enterprise, an engineer and a business expert, and provided them with introductions to UK social enterprise organizations, such as one called Aduna, which sells superfood products, which are very popular in the UK market. And Aduna helped Moringa expand its businesses and benefited and empowered, as you see, over 1,000 farmers and increased their incomes fourfold. Here, closer to Korea, is an example of the way in which we can play our part. These are Indonesian women who also make products from recycled material, in this case textiles. Here, the important thing is that the motivation of the founder of what's known as Pelangi Nusantara was motivated primarily by a wish to empower women in her community, a community which gave very few opportunities for women to play an active part outside the home. And the founder joined one of our programs, a program called Community Entrepreneurs Challenge in partnership with the Arthur Guinness Fund, and received mentoring and some seed funding to grow her enterprise. And she also gained the training skills so that she could teach others to set up their own small enterprises using textiles, in this case, that are treated as waste by the local factories, which are then recycled into new products, and that provides income for some of the poorest families in the community. So, I mean, those were examples of work that gets very close to the social beneficiaries. At the other end of the spectrum is what we do in policy support and thought leadership. And this is where our long-term presence in a country and our strong links with government and with influencers gives us access to the policymakers. So, for example, in Thailand, we've been given a seat on the National Social Enterprise Committee and brought experts on UK funding models who've in turn helped Thailand create their own and first ever social impact fund. In Vietnam, we've worked with the government there to share the experience of the UK in defining social enterprise for legislative purposes. And as already referred to, that's crucial to providing the frameworks that remove those ambiguities about how you categorize a business as having social benefit or not. And that's led to a new law. And in Europe, lastly, we played a key role in the creation of the Vision for Social Enterprise in Europe 2020 Declaration. And yes, I mean, Nick's mentioned what happened on Friday with the exit from the EU. That won't take place for a very long time, I have to stress. And I believe that Britain, with its very strong social enterprise networks, will still play a big part as part of the networks that both exist in the EU and in Europe in general. And here in Korea, we've been very proud to have worked so closely with both government and non-government sectors, and you are, of course, a leader in the field. Just to mention, in 2011, we were a partner with the UK business giant Diageo, one of the big drinks companies, and the Korea Social Enterprise Network in a big venture called Social Venture Competition Asia, and that helped young people with business planning, drawing on the expertise of the traditional business sector, and the winners of the competition were able to join others in the United States for the global edition of this competition. Convening. The importance of convening people such as yourself is something I think we all recognize as a very effective way of developing the sector. And we bring policymakers together. Very recently in Hong Kong, in May, 14 countries were represented at an Asia Policy Dialogue. Korea, of course, was a key participant. And this brought countries at various stages of development in the social enterprise sector to talk about how one sustains policies, how one develops them, and in some cases, of course, policies are very new. And I know that many countries look to the Social Enterprise Promotion Act of 2007, which you've already mentioned, which did so much in Korea to drive growth in the sector. I wasn't at the meeting, unfortunately, but I've seen a record of it, and investment and the whole setting up of social economy funds was a recurring theme. And it got into detail about tax regimes, data issues, and social impact measures. So I think it moved the agenda along very, very successfully. And we like to bring strong examples of success to others. I mean, here, in collaboration with the UK government, you see a Scottish social enterprise sharing its products and events, and I think later on we'll see some more recent examples from our other speakers. And of course, I mean, as we'll witness today, there is no substitute to hearing the stories of how towns and communities have linked social enterprise work with the regeneration of areas where huge shifts and changes in industrial production have deeply affected communities. And living in Korea for 2.5 years, a nation that, of course, has been built on its manufacturing success, and seeing changes such as is happening right now to the shipbuilding industry it makes one realize that all that's been learnt from other countries who've seen similar, very rapid and often very painful changes in the industrial sector, the experience of the development of social enterprise will, of course, I think, produce a lot of quick ideas and effective ideas as to how you find new ways of generating jobs and income and purpose in communities that are, of course, suffering from such dramatic change. I mentioned education very quickly. I mean, we are, as I said, very keen to share our experience, and Nick has talked about the experience of the University of Northampton. For example, in Thailand, we've worked on a program called the Thai UK University Curriculum Development Buddy program, and that brings together students and faculty to look at how social enterprise is an option as a career, and it broadens the outlook, of course, of everybody involved and starts that important process of realizing that social enterprise is an option, it's a global phenomenon, and it doesn't just apply to emerging economies, but even to the more established, rich economies in the world, which are facing very similar problems, such as income inequality. And none of this could happen without partnerships. I noticed Nick put up a lot of logos. I think that's another theme in all of our work, that we can't do this without working across all sorts of sectors. So you see there government, higher education, think tanks, media groups, foundations, businesses. And I think what they must all share is a similar determination to support positive social change, sustainable development and inclusive growth, and embrace social enterprise, dare I say it, as a philosophy that can turn investment into not only income for communities, but also social capital that will help build better societies. And as part of our advocacy for your sector, we try and tell the transformative narrative that many have now adopted. And this shows the added value of collaborative economics, which I'm sure, in fact, is the motivation for almost all of us here, if not all of us, today. And it's the reason why we've chosen to devote time and energy to supporting others who want to find a role for themselves, which goes beyond the competitive model to the collaborative one. And I think this forum is a very good example of that collaborative approach, and I hope that we will together be able to achieve this 4 value-based outcomes that drive the social economy movement. And here they are: sustainability, humanity, equality, and subjectivity. Thank you very much for inviting me today and for giving me the opportunity to join you at this impressive event, and I wish the day every success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. 네, 마틴 프라이어 영국 문화원장님의 강연을 잘 들었습니다. 네, 프라이어 원장님께서는 글로벌 사회적 기업 프로그램에 대해 말씀해 주셨는데요. 사회적 기업을 통한 국가 간 문화 교류 증진과 신뢰관계 강화에 대한 내용이 상당히 인상적이었습니다. 네, 팻폴 부총장님은 사회적 기업의 규모는 상대적으로 아직 작지만 성장하고 있고, 또 미래의 사회에 긍정적인 영향을 미친다는 점이 더욱 중요하기 때문에 그 부분을 상당히 강조해 주셨습니다. 네, 이렇게 두 분의 기조 연설을 모두 들어봤는데요. 아마 여러분들께서도 더더욱이 많은 질문들이 있으실 것으로 예상이 됩니다. 질의응답 시간을 저희가 지금 준비하기 위해서 단상을 정리하고 있는데요. 잠시 기다려주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 기조연설을 해주실 닉 팻폴트 노샘프턴 대학 부총장님과 마틴 프라이어 영국 문화원장님을 모시고 저희가 질의응답 시간을 가져보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 현재 동시 통역이 진행되고 있으니까 질의 및 답변을 하실 때는 한국어 혹은 영어로 편하게 말씀하시면 됩니다. 네, 혹시 오늘 기조연설을 들으시면서 궁금하셨던 내용 있으시면 질문해 주시기 바랍니다. 질문이 있으신 분은 손을 들어주시면 저희 스태프가 마이크를 전달해 드리겠습니다.
네, 감사합니다. 저는 제주 사회적 경제 네트워크에서 온 강나루라고 하고요. 처음에 기조연설 해주신 부총장님께 제 영어로 여쭤보도록 하겠습니다. Thank you very much for your speech, Vice Chancellor. I'm working for Social Economy Network in Jeju Island, and my question is about the results in social economy sector you highlighted in the later part of speech. And my question is there particular results you think we need to pursue and achieve? And what kind of impact or how much impact can quantitative growth in social economy bring to us? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very good question. There's a lot of research taking place in universities in the UK and around the world in trying to find a way to quantify social impact in a way that's simple and that can be understood not just within one country but is perhaps transferable to other territories as well. Now that is very hard. If you take a comparison from the financial world, something like a big FTSE 100 company, you can look at the accounts and you can look at like the price-earnings ratio, which is one number, which gives you a benchmark. Okay, that's simple, and you can decide whether you want to invest or not. Now, it's social impact investing and metrics around that is far more complicated, and I don't think that there is one, maybe not even 2 or 5 magic numbers that will tell you exactly how well your company is doing, your social enterprise is doing in a way that you can get in a commercial environment. That doesn't mean we don't need to look for magic numbers, if you understand what I mean by magic numbers. One of the projects we've been working on at Northampton is something called the social value metric, SV metric, which takes into consideration the amount of money that's invested in the company, and then quantitative and qualitative surveys over time which show the amount of good, if that's the word you want to use, or the impact that the money has had on reducing whatever the problem is that you're setting out to solve, right? So if you're investing in a company that's making a claim that it's going to reduce crime in the neighborhood, then you'll need to look at statistics for crime reduction. Now that would be a very different set of metrics from a company that's a community interest company looking at reducing the number of patients in hospital beds. Because it's not crime there, is it? It's numbers of beds that are reduced and how much money you can put in order to do that. So it's a very interesting area of research. I don't think there ever will be some straightforward numbers in the way that you can use in the purely financial world to benchmark outputs and metrics. I think it will be distinct on the particular social enterprise and social problem you're trying to solve with the business model. If anybody's got any good ideas, I'd be very, very keen to hear. Thank you for the question.
네, 질문에 답변이 됐는가요? 네, 혹시 또 다른 질문 있으신 분 질문해 주시기 바랍니다.
귀한 강의 잘 들었습니다. 저는 대학에서 사회적 경제에 대해서 학생들을 가르치고 또 사회적 경제에 대해서 연구하는 연구가인데요. 아까 미스터 닉 팩포트 씨 말씀하신 것 중에 사회적 기업가들이 어떤 프로세스보다 더 중요한 게 리절트라고 말씀을 하셨는데 룰이나 정의에 얽매이지 말라고 말씀을 하셨습니다. 그리고 무엇보다도 중요한 게 임팩트의 결과라고 하셨습니다. 근데 그거를 얼핏 들으면 사회적 기업가들은 다른 어떤 과정보다 그 경제적인 어마운트가 중요하다라고도 잘못하면 들릴 수가 있거든요. 근데 제 생각에는 사회적 기업은 소셜 밸류를 창출하는 게 굉장히 중요하고 그 기업의 철학이 중요하다고 생각을 합니다. 그래서 잘못 들으면 그 이코노믹 밸류가 많은 것이 더 중요할 수 있다라는 그런 의미는 아닐 것 같은데, 그렇죠? 임팩트의 결과가 뭔지 조금 더 자세히 말씀해 주시겠습니까?
Yeah, so what I meant by process is that in the United Kingdom there are different process models for setting up a social enterprise and different process models for governance of social enterprise. There may be 5 or 6 at least. Now you could spend a lot of time developing the process model for a social enterprise or social enterprises, which is fine. That's one way to look at the issue. The other, I think, more fruitful, more productive way is for a social enterprise just to choose very quickly which type of governance structure they want to be. And I say in the United Kingdom there are 4 or 5 at least. You could be company limited by guarantee, which is a process piece. You could be a community interest company. You could be a straightforward charity. Once you've decided quickly, then the process is done. You are what you are because you've decided, and then you can carry on very quickly doing the good work that you've set yourself up to do in the first place. And some of that will be economic impact, but also it will be the softer side. It will be society impact as well. That's why it's so hard to quantify the metrics around a successful social enterprise, because if you're set up to put people into houses, from poor quality houses to higher quality houses, you can measure that. But how do you measure the well-being of the people in those houses? How do you measure their happiness? What's the number for being happy? It's very important, obviously, to make people appreciate their environment if you change them in housing circumstances, etc. But it's not the same as making a shareholder happy, is it? You know what makes a shareholder happy? It's dividends. How do you find a way, a language, a metric to express the more emotive side of what a social enterprise will be doing, the social aspect as opposed to the enterprise aspect? So please forgive me if I've given you the impression that in the United Kingdom social enterprise is all about economic metrics. It isn't. It's just that those are the ones that are easiest to measure, and that's why we're struggling to find a comprehensive suite of metrics that capture the economic side and the social side in terms of things like happiness and well-being, etc.
네, 또 다른 질문 있으실까요? 네. 네, 잠시만요. 네, 마이크 드리겠습니다.
네, 저는 여기 현재 강주에서 사회적 기업을 운영하고 있는 대표 김혜인란입니다. 한국에서는 사회적 기업이 시작을 해서 국가의 지원이 종료가 되면 한 20% 정도가 문을 닫습니다. 근데 이거를 지속적으로 운영하기 위해서 영국에서는 어느 정도의 어떤 방식으로 지원이 이루어지고 있는지에 대해서 알고 싶고요. 그리고 또 하나는 영국에서는 사회적 기업들이 국제적으로 어떻게 기여하고 밖으로 국제적으로 진출하고 있는지 그걸 알고 싶고, 그러한 방안들이 한국에서도 가능한지에 대해서 알고 싶습니다.
네, 지금 동시 통역 때문에 시간이 저희가 조금 기다리면 좋겠습니다. 네.
Is it for both of us? Or?
Nick, well, you start on the first, because
Okay.
you're probably closer to the sector
Yeah.
in the UK.
So the sustainability piece is very important. Now, in the UK, we do have special funding bodies. So I'm a director of a company called Unlimited, which has in 2000 had a £100 million investment fund, and we use that money to pump prime social enterprise projects across the UK. We don't use that money to continue to fund them past a certain point, so maybe 2 or 3 years. After that, we expect the social enterprise to be a trading enterprise and it becomes self-sustainable. If it doesn't, then the social enterprise will have to close. Okay? In the same way, Big Society Capital has money for projects which will start for startups to get them moving. That's the early phase. There are also other finances available that I spoke about, social investment finances. But they're not in perpetuity. They don't last forever. At some stage, you have to stop the funding, and the social enterprise will either live or it will die because it can't find a way to fund itself. Otherwise, you just end up providing a charitable society, which is just driven entirely through government funds, and that actually doesn't give some of the savings that are required in terms of public service delivery, certainly in the UK. What you have to do as a successful social enterprise in Britain is to convince somebody to fund you. That'll either be a member of the public who's buying your services, or it would be some kind of investment vehicle, a social impact investment vehicle, where money is given to you so that you can then scale up to the next stage. But at every stage of the investment cycle, there comes a point when you have to stand alone, right, and use your own wit and your own resources to keep yourself financially sustainable.
Shall I answer the second half of the question? I want to give one good example of where an idea, right, which of course is a very famous social enterprise, which we witnessed the Korean version of this morning getting an award, The Big Issue. It's an idea, I believe, started in the UK. And that idea took root in many different countries. The concept is the same everywhere, which is it gives an opportunity for homeless people to earn some money in return for providing, I suppose it's a community, brings the community together because people feel that they are helping somebody who is having a very tough life to have a role, because the human contact between the seller and the buyer is one of the key things about The Big Issue. But you will find that in each country, the content, for example, of The Big Issue is very different. There isn't one model, but they're part of a network that meets quite frequently, I understand, and looks at new ideas in which they can scale it up. So I think that it's not about taking UK social enterprises and extending their reach. It's about sharing the ideas. And of course, it's very much two-way. I have seen how UK social enterprises learn a lot by engaging with their counterparts across the world. Where I think they have a very big role is because of the experience of many years when it comes to training and passing on skills, particularly in countries where the social enterprise context is quite a new one, where, as I mentioned earlier on, countries have been very dependent on aid. It helps that process of shifting from aid dependency to new models of a social economy.
Can I just come back again to that, because it's an interesting question and I can answer it in a different way that perhaps brings more things together. In the UK, we've as a university, we own 20% of a company called Goodwill Solutions. Goodwill Solutions is a social enterprise. It was set up 5 years ago, and its social mission is to only employ ex-offenders in the UK, men. If you're a young man in Britain and you go to jail, when you leave, you've got a 50, 60, maybe 70% chance you will re-offend within 12 months. Go back to jail. Why? Because no one will employ you. You can't get a job. You're stuck instantly in a cycle. Now, that's bad for the individual, but it's bad for society because your things are being stolen. And when the person goes back to jail, it's a cost because the taxpayer pays a lot of money to keep people in prison. So how do you begin to break that cycle? You need to get more companies to take a risk to employ people who are ex-offenders. This company called Goodwill Solutions is a logistics company based in Northampton, We like what they did, so we are a 20% stakeholder. That company is now so successful, it's going international. So to the second part of the question, that will start to trade across Europe, irrespective of any Brexit. We'll still be trading in Europe, obviously. And that will bring a very interesting international dimension to a company that started up as a social enterprise with the sole purpose of keeping people out of jail. So I think that's one example of hundreds, maybe even thousands across the UK and across the world where social enterprises can scale up and then become international.
Thank you. 네, 또 추가적인 질문 있으시면은 손을 들어주시기 바랍니다. 네, 없으신가요? 네, 여러분들의 뜨거운 관심을 저희가 있으신가요?
네, 좋은 강연 감사드립니다. 강연 잘 들었습니다. 네, 저는 한국사회적기업진흥원의 정민지입니다. 네, 마틴 프라이어 주한영국문화원장님께 질문을 드리고 싶습니다. 그 강연을 보면 Think Global, Trade Social 같이 그 외국의 다른 사회적 기업을 육성하거나 지원하는 프로그램을 운영하고 있는데 이런 프로그램을 통해서 반대로 영국이 다른 나라로부터 배우는 점이 있는지 설명을 해주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Difficult to sum up because I think the lessons will be taken away by individual UK social enterprises that participate. I think, though, a general answer to your question is what the UK has learnt is just how big a sector this is becoming, and that we are not alone in seeing it as a sort of rising movement, one that is getting enormous interest particularly from young people, but also is very much on the political agenda. Because as Nick has mentioned, the cost of many services, if run by government, is often higher than if run by a social enterprise. Because of the motivation behind that social enterprise, the desire for a social purpose. And that we've learnt that there are models all around the world which may not be called social enterprise, and there was some mention earlier by Mr. Moon of community activity in other cultures, which goes quite far back historically, and that our models are not the only ones. And I think that the research, some of the research, for example, that the universities are doing in collaboration with other universities around the world, will begin to create new ideas. Because we are talking about innovation. It's an area, social enterprise, that is very ripe for innovation, and I think by that exchange of ideas, we will see a lot of improvements in the sector in the UK.
네, 질문에 답변이 되셨나요? 네, 저희가 한 분 더 질문 받겠습니다.
My name is Hyun Chun-jung from SK Group. Mr. Padford made a comment which is very difficult, not too easy to be raised at a forum like this, Brexit issue. You told us that the Brexit might be a chance or an opportunity for the social economy sector or for rebalancing the UK economy. And in some sense, I can agree with your opinion in that an economy focusing on just already developed megacities, well-globalized industries like financial sector leaves us many problems, so-called neoliberal capitalism problems. However, I don't think separation or isolation can be a kind of eternal answer. Going back to the past is not the answer for the problems like them. I think we need to bridge the gap made by the globalization and not, just opposing it is not the answer. So just saying that practice can be a chance may mislead or confuse the people who are working in the social economy sectors and contributing for those sectors. So I'd like to ask some like this. Do I misunderstand your comments or wrongly? Or any comments on my understanding?
Okay, well, no, thank you for answering the question. So what I meant by my comment was that the UK, some commentators in Britain have said for a while now that the UK economy is too dependent on financial services. Now that may not be the case. In the UK, manufacturing is still there. Something like 12% of our economy is manufacturing, but 4% of our economy, 4% of our GDP now is through the social economy, through social enterprise. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that if, because of Brexit, we saw a significant reduction in financial services in London and elsewhere, that the social economy could make up for that. That clearly, I don't think there's enough scale in the system for that to happen. But what I meant by the opportunity piece is that this vote has happened. There's, my understanding, no going back. So the UK, which is still, don't forget, the 5th largest economy on planet Earth, right, has a major role to play in the world. And actually leaving the EU is not, of itself, a forced isolation. The country still has to work and will continue to work with our bigger partners around the world. Most of the trade in the UK en masse, I think, comes from the United States still. We want to work with them. We'll still be working very closely with Europe. We are part of the European continent, geographically. So if I can make one message clear, and I can imagine from your perspective, looking on the news at the United Kingdom, it probably looks quite chaotic. When you're there, life goes on. Nothing significantly has changed, in my opinion. Maybe there will be some issues subsequently, but over the coming months, things will settle down. There's absolutely no way this means that Britain is not a global player and will not continue to work and trade, not just across Europe, but across the rest of the world. If there is a rebalancing because of the withdrawal of some of the financial services sectors, and in fact today some of the big banks, HSBC, said that they're not going to leave, they will still stay in the UK. But if that were to happen, there is an opportunity for, as I said, the social economy to get more involved in the UK economy at large. And I think that would be a good thing. You must have an opinion, I'm sure. You can be diplomatic about it.
I would only add, well, I agree with Nick that in the immediate aftermath of the results, there has been a feeling, I think it's fair to say, around the world that something very, very significant and that's produced some level of instability has occurred. But as I was sharing with Nick earlier on, our institutions already have quite extraordinarily strong links around the world, and that the links through the EU are only one part of that. And whilst it's true that there are lots of programs that the European Union, in which the British participated with the EU, these are not the only ones. And that the institutional strengths, particularly, for example, in higher education, in research, and in business, will, I think, continue to prosper and thrive. I think what Nick was trying to say, that if there are gaps in the future, the growth of the social economy, you said it was 4%. Yep. This is a significant sector, and there may well be opportunities for that sector in the future. We're very much at the very early stages. I mean, one thing you probably all realize is that our political leadership is going through quite a lot of change, and we won't know who the new Prime Minister is until September, because our processes of party politics are rather long, drawn-out ones. And I think until then, you will see a media in the UK that is very focused on that particular drama that's unfolding. But actually, as you say, life goes on. The institutions are very stable, and absolutely nothing changes in terms of our relationship through the EU until a whole range of exit processes have happened. And I think we'll have a lot of time to work out what the consequences are of those and how we will cope with them as a country.
I think the withdrawal process will be long and protracted, perhaps. The Article 50 hasn't been invoked yet, which is the formal evocation that the UK will leave the European Union. There's at least a 2-year lag in that, which will take us up to 2018. One country that left the EU recently was Greenland, and it took them 3 years to renegotiate their contract out, and all they had to worry about was fish.
Okay, thank you. 네, 감사합니다. 네, 여러분들의 깊은 관심과 호기심으로 상당히 중요하고 의미 있는 질문들을 해주셔서요. 또 저희가 더 자세하고 다각적인 답변을 들을 수 있었습니다. 네, 더 많은 질문을 듣고 싶은데요. 시간 관계상 저희가 없어서 추가적인 질문은 한국사회적기업진흥원의 사이트로 문의를 주시면 저희가 정리해서 답변을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 네, thank you, Mr. Petford and Mr. Fryer.